to show you an image that has appeared all over the internet and has been an important image for 2 decades. And this is an image that appears over and over of women laughing alone with salad. I know. It's been memed, it's been mocked, it's been turned into art installations, and yet it deeply communicates something. It communicates that our joy needs to come from lightness and restraint. It is telling women that we can't just have full-bodied, pleasurable relationship with food. It's talking to us in a deeply cultural way. And what we see is that when food became this gendered was quite some time ago in my culture. My name's Melissa Clark-Reynolds. I'm a futurist. I specialise in the future of food, agriculture and technology. And I keep finding myself wondering why it is that food has, over the last couple of centuries, become such a debate about gender and society. It feels to me like we can't have real conversations about nutrition, about diets, without now bumping up against cultural identities and almost tribalist beliefs about what it is that people should eat. Now, I'm going to start here with where many of us get our advice about nutrition these days, and it's on our phones. And I want to be clear, there is nothing wrong with women making content largely for women about food. But we see a bunch of cultural messages encoded in these Instagram posts. The colour palette that women use, the nature of the food that we show to each other. The majority of food influencers and wellness influencers are women. And those women speak to women who are the major consumers of that product in very encoded ways. Plant-based, clean eating. We think about the matcha bowls. I got offered a chia bowl for lunch yesterday and barely knew how to eat the thing, right? And so we see these codings and we see veganism being an area where there are a small number of male influencers, but it is heavily dominated by women influencers. And to be fair, like I've even made some of their recipes that I've seen off Instagram. So I want to be clear, I'm not judging this, but I'm super interested in how our food got encoded in colour, how it got encoded in language of lightness, of restraint, of control. And what we see is that women eating has become like a moral discussion, that when women are eating, they are transforming something. They're transforming their diet, they're transforming their bodies, they're transforming their selves, they're transforming the planet. It's become a moral imperative for what it is that women eat and how we think about women's food. And these words of restraint and control come through over and over again. Alternatively, we see the colour palette of when men are marketing food to men. We see these masculine colours, we see the strong images, we see meat, blood, muscle, liver, power. And I really found myself wondering what was going on here. We see over and over again that there's an encoding in our society that somehow vegetables have become soft. Vegetables are modern. Vegetables are associated with femininity and in the manosphere from everything that is wrong in this world. And then alternatively, we see the growth of the carnivore diet. And this is a diet that is predominantly dependent on animal protein and animal foods. We see very, very few influencers in this space that are women. I managed to find 2, and it took me hours and hours of scouring the internet to find those 2. Interestingly, they were also Republicans. And so what we see is that this political discussion comes with the coding of meat as male as well. We're seeing Robert Kennedy Jr. in the US become the Secretary of Human Health and Services, And with that appointment, we see his distrust of the feminine. We see his distrust of seed oils, distrust of vegetarian food, and we've seen a complete change in the nature of the American food triangle through politics and identity, not through a discussion about nutrition. It has become very difficult to have a conversation with a vegan about their nutrition, or to have a conversation, like vegan junk food's still junk food, right? Exactly the same to have a conversation with a carnivore about their need for fibre, or whether they're increasing their likelihood of getting colon and bowel cancer. We can't have these conversations because their identity has become tied up in these food tribes. We also see here that the growth of the GLP-1 drugs is also deeply coded for gender. 51% of the world's obese people identify as women. And yet, depending on which country you're in, between 60 and 80% of the users of the GLP-1 medications are women. These are the medications like Ozempic and Wegovy. They reduce appetite. And what we see with that as well is that in the advertising, there is deep difference between the way that these drugs are advertised to women or to men. And research has shown that 96% of the ads for these drugs are aimed at women. So remember this, 51% of the people living with obesity identify as women, and 96% of the advertising is aimed at women. And behind me, you can see a slide that shows how the difference in the advertising looks. So the advertising for women is about freedom and liberation. Freedom from cravings, liberation from their appetite. The advertising that is aimed at men, and remember, it's only 4% of those ads, is all additive. It's about men's power, it's about men's strength, and it's about men's vitality. And we see this whole performing at their peak. What we see encoded in the language of the advertising is, for women, it is subtractive. It is about what they want to take away from their lives. And the advertising for men is additive. It's about how much more they want in their lives. And this worries me. Like, when did women's appetites become something that we needed to subtract from our existence? And when did men's appetites become a biological drive or a right that they had? And we can take this back to the Victorian era. We can see the waif-like, corseted Victorian women for whom fasting was seen as a virtue. We can think about the 1950s housewives who were expected to feed everybody else first, and interestingly correlated with the release of the first weight loss drugs that were available. We also saw the rise of exercise and calorie counting, and then later clean eating. And each of these movements has sought to control women through the control of their bodily experience. If we're hungry, that needs to be controlled. If we take up space, that needs to be controlled. But men haven't survived the patriarchy particularly well either, to be fair. In that same Victorian era, what was called pugilism, men stripping off and fighting each other. And on one hand, you can go, well, that was pretty homoerotic. On the other hand, what we see is still the beginnings of a discussion about what it is to have a male body. And that strength and vitality were no longer about perhaps the ability to work a farm or to do daily work, but instead, in the urbanisation of men as well, about how you maintain this sort of physique. And then we saw what it was to be a man in the 50s, long lunches, steak, martinis. And they had a big kind of cultural moment around what that was. What was a treat food for a man? Later, we saw the bodybuilding movements. For those of you who are older and maybe lived in Wellington, I remember there was a milk bar just down the road here that sold egg flips when I was a child. And it was a remnant of this raw meat, raw egg movement of the 1960s. And finally, we now see the looks-maxing movement. Men marketing to men what they think straight women want from a man. Baffling to me. Most of these men don't even seem to know any women. Now, that weight loss and wellness industry has been great at marketing to all of our anxieties. And I think we often think it's only women who have anxiety about the way we look. But we can tell from these previous movements that men also get messages that play into the anxieties about how they should look, what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a man. I find it so fascinating now when gender is much more discussed than ever before and is much more fluid than ever before. We have these very strong gendered cultural stories around food. But food itself is gender neutral. There is nothing inherently feminine about a carrot. There is nothing inherently masculine about liver. And yet I advise a number of food companies, and we've discovered a couple of things. We've interviewed women in supermarkets, and we find that women predominantly buy what they think their families will eat. And what we found is that men in that same supermarket will buy what they want to eat. Isn't that interesting? And then we've found that we can code products in the supermarket by gender that tell men or women which of those is for them. We see that creatine, exactly the same product in a pink packet, is about beauty and wellness. And we see in a black packet, it's about power and vitality. We see that if we put the word primal on a meat product, women don't buy it. They know it is not coded for them. But fascinatingly, when we've put primal on that meat product, we've largely taken out some of the expensive ingredients and replaced them with cheaper organ meat. And now that it is encoded as a primal meatball for a man, we can charge twice as much for it. Fascinating. That black packet of creatine, go check. It'll cost a lot more than the one for women. Interesting, isn't it? So what do you want to put on this plate? What is actually available to us? That woman with the lettuce, I want to reinforce, she wasn't laughing because the lettuce was funny. She was laughing because this is the version of joy that we've been sold. And instead, this is much more what dinner at my place looks like. There's some friends. It's a bit messy. We maybe ate too much. We probably drank too much. You can see there's breadcrumbs on the table and the plates don't match. But what we're doing is we're having fun together. And I want you to have a last little think about, when did pleasure from food become something that we were not supposed to have? When did just simple joy of hanging out with our friends, knocking back a glass of wine and eating a slice of bread, that almost feels like a revolutionary act these days for a woman? And so I leave you with this last thought. If your plate is empty, what would you choose to put on it rather than the stories that our culture is telling you you want to put on it? Thank you.